Another hot topic on the ballot, recreational marijuana. After a lot of speculation, a lot of debate, Californians, they decided to reject it this past week, reject the recreational use of marijuana. But it hasn't stopped a new campaign from already developing in Colorado to put legalization on the state ballot there in 2012. And there is a new study in the British Journal that concludes that alcohol is more dangerous than heroin, LSD, or even cocaine. So we wanted to dig a little deeper on that specific issue in a second, but you know, my specialty is the brain. So I found these stories together very interesting, and we want to talk about how these things might affect the brain. First of all, the human brain, you know, is the command center of your body. You know that. It controls everything you do and say, and drugs and chemicals work in the brain by tapping into the communication system, sort of interfering with the way that nerve cells normally send, receive, and process information. We have various neurotransmitters, specifically in the brain. They are sort of the chemical messengers, and drugs like nicotine, cocaine, marijuana, well, they target these messengers. They also affect the brain's reward system, and that reward system responds to pleasure by releasing the neurotransmitters, such as dopamine, and those neurotransmitters regulate movement, emotion, the process of thought, motivation, and pleasure. So you get an idea of what happens specifically. Drugs tend to hijack that system, causing large amounts of dopamine to overflow it. The large amounts of dopamine are what causes the sort of euphoria that you experience sometimes, and also some of the crashes afterward. Marijuana, for example, interferes with normal functions of the brain like coordination, attention, altering time and space, and also reducing short-term memory. Today we have Dr. Marvin Seppala, an addiction specialist from Hazelden Addiction Treatment Center, to clarify some of these facts for us. Good morning to you, sir. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good morning.
First of all, this study, a lot of people have been talking about it, the British study talking about alcohol and comparing it to a lot of these other drugs, cocaine, LSD, heroin. What do you make of that study?
You know, it's an interesting and worthwhile study in that it was primarily designed to inform the government about how to use their money to address the ills associated with drugs of abuse and with alcohol. And they really took an objective examination and defined the significant ills associated with alcohol use compared to other drugs. They looked at harm to self versus harm to others and kind of added this up. And the harm to others, social ills associated with drug abuse and alcohol use, revealed the major problem associated with alcohol.
For the average person out there who hears this, I mean, what is the takeaway for them? And is this more a reflection of the fact that just more people use alcohol versus these other drugs?
That's a major aspect of it, that tremendously more people use alcohol than the other drugs, but also people that use alcohol are more likely to engage in high-risk activities, driving while intoxicated, domestic violence, and the like, where people who use the other drugs, in some respects, let's compare to heroin, are often going to be tired and not very active.
Interesting. That's a good transition to what happened in California this week, Proposition 19. Recreational marijuana use being legalized. That was on the ballot. It did not pass, as you know. Does that surprise you, first of all, that it did not pass?
It does surprise me. I thought that in California that just might pass, and certainly people were preparing for that.
But so, and this is something that comes up a lot, and we do a lot of reporting on this particular issue, but this is your field of expertise. So marijuana, how bad is it, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting that? How much of a harm does this drug cause, and do you think maybe it should be legalized then?
You know, the harms are relatively minimal, and some of it isn't fully studied, unlike alcohol. I mean, if you compare it to alcohol, alcohol is remarkably more harmful from a medical and a societal perspective, but marijuana causes, in acute use, you know, while you're intoxicated and shortly afterwards, some memory problems, concentration problems, slower reaction time, a little incoordination. Long-term problems include some minor hormonal changes, primarily sexual hormones for men and women, but there's no evidence of long-term problems with memory or concentration. There are some problems associated with long-term use in adolescence, though, and that's where the real difficulty lies, and that one of the major tasks of adolescence is learning in school and the like, and because of these short-term memory and concentration problems, that alters life significantly.
Did you have a memory lapse right in the middle of that answer? Just kidding.
I did. I'm sorry about
Don't answer that. Real quick, though, just sorry about that. Legalization of marijuana. This is your world again. What are your thoughts? I mean, you think it should be legalized ultimately for recreational use?
You know, we're in the recovery business. However, if you look at legalization, you really have to say it's probably the least problematic of the options that exist. I mean, there's just so many difficulties with jailing our youth because of you know, use of marijuana, because they've been caught with marijuana.
Yeah.
And we get an opportunity to actually treat them medically if we don't put them into the legal system.
Fascinating discussion. Dr. Seppala, thanks so much. Stay tuned, though. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this again. Appreciate your time.
I appreciate it as well. Thank you.